My hand was shaking so hard I couldn't get the key into the lock. Not from cold. From the voicemail I just listened to for the fourth time. My mother's voice flat and rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in a mirror. "We didn't destroy anything, sweetheart. We just gave it to someone who'd actually use it." I stood there on that porch, keys jammed halfway into a lock that used to open the door to my own office. My own name was still on the glass. Somebody had already taped a printout over it. Behind me, a car door slammed. I didn't turn around. I already knew whose car it was. "You shouldn't be here," a voice said, calm, almost bored. "This isn't your building anymore." I looked down at the key in my hand. I looked at the new name taped over mine. And I thought, okay, let's see how long you can keep smiling. My name is Daniel Voss. I was 26 years old, and I had just watched 10 years of my life get taken from me in the time it takes to change a lock. Let me back up. At 19, I started a logistics software company out of my dorm room called Fairline Routing, a scheduling platform that helped small regional trucking companies cut fuel costs by optimizing delivery routes. Sounds boring. It was not boring. By the time I was 23, Fairline had 11 employees, 47 contracted clients, and revenue just under $1.8 million a year. I'd taken out $60,000 in student loans to build the first version. I'd slept in the office for 2 years straight. I hadn't taken a real vacation since I was 17. My parents, Richard and Carol Voss, had invested $40,000 into Fairline when I was 21, money I paid back with interest inside 18 months. That loan came with paperwork. That paperwork would matter later. Remember that. My younger sister, Melissa, was 24. She had failed at 2 businesses before Fairline even existed. A boutique clothing line that lost $22,000 of my parents' money, and a wellness coaching venture that lasted 4 months. My parents never once called those failures. They called them learning experiences. When I failed to hit a quarterly target, they called it concerning. The stakes when this story starts were exactly this: a company worth roughly $2.3 million on paper, 47 client contracts I built relationship by relationship over 6 years, and a family that I still, stupidly, naively trusted completely. I didn't know yet that my parents had been meeting with my sister for 3 months, planning how to take it all away from me and hand it to her instead. I found out on a Tuesday. It was a Tuesday in March, and I came back early from a client trip to Ohio because my flight got moved up. I still had my roller bag with me when I walked into the Fairline office at 6:40 p.m., expecting an empty building. Instead, I heard laughter. My mother was sitting in my office chair. My chair. She was wearing the blazer she only wore for important occasions, the navy one with the gold buttons, and she had a glass of champagne in her hand. Real champagne in the good flutes she kept locked in her china cabinet at home. She'd brought her own glassware to my office. Melissa was standing at my whiteboard. My client roadmap, the one I'd spent 4 months building with every renewal date, every contact name, every negotiated rate, had been photographed. I could see her phone propped against my monitor, still open to the photo gallery. My father was on my office phone, talking to a client, introducing himself as the new operations lead's father, just making sure the transition goes smooth. Nobody had told me there was a transition. "She's a natural," my mother was saying, swirling her champagne. Honestly, watching her take this over, it's like watching what Daniel could have been if he'd had her instincts. Melissa laughed, a short, satisfied laugh, the kind you make when you already know you've won. "He'll be fine. He always lands on his feet. That's kind of his whole personality, the family cleanup crew." I stood in the doorway in my work clothes, roller bag still in my hand, and none of them saw me. I could have announced myself right then. Every instinct told me to. I didn't. I backed out slowly and I closed the door without a sound. Beat 1, the paper trail. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and pulled every filing I had access to, incorporation documents, the operating agreement, the client contracts. I was still the sole owner of Fairline Routing LLC. On paper, nothing had changed. Yet, the next morning I asked my father, casually over coffee, what he'd meant on the phone about a transition. He didn't even blink. We're just formalizing what's already happening organically, he said, stirring his coffee with the same spoon he'd used every morning of my childhood. Melissa's bringing a fresh energy to client relations. You've been so buried in the technical side, Daniel, someone needed to step up on the people side. It's just good org design. Org design. My father had never run a company in his life. He'd worked 30 years in municipal permitting. I nodded. I said that made sense. I said I appreciated him thinking about the company's growth. Inside, I was already opening a second laptop. Beat 2 the client calls. Over the next 11 days, I quietly called 6 of my 47 clients myself, using my personal cell instead of the office line. 4 of them mentioned, unprompted, that they'd already been contacted by the new Fairline team, and told that Daniel's stepping back to focus on product. Melissa's your new point of contact going forward. One client, a regional produce distributor out of Dayton named Hal Petrenko, told me something that made my stomach drop. Your sister said you two had already discussed it, Hal said. She said you agreed it'd be better this way, given your health. Given my health. I had never had a health issue in my life. Beat 3 confronted and the lie. I confronted Melissa directly that Friday. I kept my voice level. I asked her plainly why a client thought I was medically stepping back from a company I owned outright. She didn't even flinch. It's called a soft transition narrative, Daniel, she said, examining her nails. In client retention, you never tell people the truth is ownership dispute. That spooks accounts. You give them a clean story. I was protecting the client relationships you built. You should be thanking me. It was fluent. It was confident. It had the cadence of something rehearsed. I said thank you. I said I understood. I said I'd let it go. Beat 4 what the lie was covering. I didn't let it go. That weekend, I drove to the office at 5 a.m., let myself in with the key that hadn't been changed yet, and pulled the building's server logs myself. What I found wasn't a soft transition. It was a new LLC. Melissa had filed papers for Fairline Solutions Group 9 days after that champagne night. A name close enough to confuse vendors, different enough to be legally distinct. She'd used a template pulled straight from a $19.99 online legal service. And in her rush, she'd listed my parents' home address as the registered business address. Public record. Anyone could look it up. I did. I sat in my car in the empty parking lot at 6 a.m., holding printed incorporation papers with my sister's new company's name on them, and I felt something in my chest go very, very still and very, very cold. Beat 5 overheard. 3 days later, I came back to the office to grab a monitor I'd left behind, and I heard my parents' voices through the supply closet door, which didn't latch properly and never had. He still doesn't suspect anything, my mother said. God, he's so trusting. It's almost sad. He gets that from you, my father said, and they both laughed. The second the client list transfers clean, we cut him out of the LLC entirely, Melissa's voice added. Dad already talked to a lawyer about minority shareholder buyout language. We lowball him. He takes it because he doesn't want to fight family in court, and it's done in 60 days. I stood in that hallway with a monitor under my arm, and for the first time in 11 days, I let myself feel exactly how angry I was. Then I put the monitor down quietly and I went home to build a plan. I decided that week that the worst thing I could do was let them know I knew anything. If they thought I was fighting them, they'd move fast and sloppy, covering tracks as they went. But if they thought I was defeated, confused, tired, maybe even grateful to be relieved of the burden, they'd slow down. They'd get comfortable. And comfortable people get careless. Comfortable people talk. So I gave them a performance. I started slouching more at family dinners. I stopped correcting Melissa when she talked over me about her clients. I let my voice go soft and a little hollow, the voice of someone who'd stopped fighting. I even started carrying an old, cracked phone around instead of my real one. Dropped it on purpose once at dinner, in front of everyone, and apologized for being so scattered lately. My mother actually reached over and patted my hand. It's okay, honey, she said. This is probably for the best. You always did too much. Inside, every word of that sentence was being filed away. I told my father quietly one evening that I'd been thinking it over, and maybe a buyout wasn't the worst idea, that I was tired, that maybe I wasn't cut out for this after all. I let my voice crack slightly on the word tired. It wasn't fully an act. I was tired. I was just not tired in the way they thought. He smiled at me with something that looked horribly like pride. "That's very mature of you, son," he said. "I always knew you'd come around." I nodded, looked down at the table, and said nothing else. That's the tactic. Let them believe they've already won. People who believe they've already won stop checking their exits. Here's what I actually did during those 6 weeks of playing defeated. I hired an employment and business litigation attorney named Priya Anand, using a private email address my family didn't know existed. I gave her everything: the incorporation filing for Fairline Solutions Group, the photographed client roadmap, the recorded voicemail from my mother about giving it to someone who'd use it, screenshots of Melissa's own outreach emails to my clients, several of which had been forwarded to me, confused, by clients who assumed it was a scam. Then I set the bait. I accidentally left a printed document on my desk at the office. A fake financial summary showing Fairline was about to lose its biggest contract, a $310,000 a year account with a national parts supplier called Brenmark Logistics. It wasn't true. Brenmark had just renewed for 3 more years. But I wanted to see what my family would do if they thought the company's crown jewel was slipping. I also did something I'm not proud of needing to do but don't regret. I left my old laptop, the one with a visibly cracked screen, open on the desk with a fake resignation letter half-typed in a Word document, addressed to the Fairline board, dated for the following month. And inside that same laptop, hidden, running quietly in the background, was a screen recording and audio app I'd installed myself, uploading everything to a private cloud folder every 6 hours. Then I waited. For 9 days, my phone buzzed under the table at every family dinner with cloud sync notifications. 3 separate times I felt it vibrate against my leg while my mother asked me sweetly if I'd thought more about the buyout number. On day 10, I opened the recordings. My father, alone in my office at 7:15 p.m., had read the fake resignation letter out loud to Melissa over speakerphone, laughing. "He's basically done our job for us," he said. "Soon as this Brenmark thing falls apart, nobody's going to blame us for pushing him out. They'll say we saved the company." Melissa's voice, tinny through the laptop speaker, replied, "Perfect. Once he signs the buyout, I want his name off everything within a week. I don't even want his name in the client history logs. I had it all. Fraudulent business registration under a confusingly similar name. Intentional misrepresentation to my clients. My father's own voice discussing exploiting a fabricated crisis to force me out. And enough of a paper trail thanks to Priya to make every bit of it actionable. There was one more thing I needed. A place and a time where they'd say it to my face, in front of witnesses who mattered. My mother gave me one without meaning to. She scheduled a family celebration dinner for the following Saturday to announce officially Melissa's new role to extended family, a few of the actual Fairline employees, and unknowingly to Hal Petrenko, who my mother had invited as a client success story to show off the transition. I RSVP'd yes. The dinner was at my parents' house, the good china out, 22 people crowded into a dining room that smelled like rosemary and my mother's perfume. There was a banner. An actual banner taped above the mantel. "Congratulations, Melissa. Fairline's new ER." I sat near the end of the table, quiet, a little slumped, playing my part one last time. My mother stood and tapped her glass with a fork, the same champagne flutes from that Tuesday in March I noticed. "I just want to say how proud we are of Melissa," she said, "for stepping up where someone else couldn't quite finish what he started." Laughter. Some uncomfortable, some not uncomfortable enough. Melissa raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said, looking directly at me with a small, satisfied smile. "And to knowing when it's time to let the professionals take over." My father raised his glass too. "Some people build the house," he said, warmly, clearly proud of the line he'd clearly rehearsed. "Some people know how to actually live in it." That was the moment. I felt it arrive, calm and total, like a door closing softly somewhere inside my chest. I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I never did, not once through any of it. Before we toast, I said, I think Hal deserves to hear something, since he's here as a client success story. The room went quiet. Hal Petrenko, 3 seats down, set his glass on the table slowly. Hal, did anyone tell you that the company you signed a new 3-year, $310,000 contract with Fairline Routing isn't the company that's been contacting you for the last 6 weeks? I asked. The one calling itself Fairline Solutions Group? That's a separate LLC, filed 9 weeks ago, registered to this house. I looked at my mother. Your house. I set my phone on the table and played 11 seconds of audio. My father's voice clear as anything. Soon as this Brenmark thing falls apart, nobody's going to blame us for pushing him out. Nobody moved. There is no Brenmark crisis, I said. I made that document up. I wanted to see what you do with it. Now everyone in this room knows exactly what you do with it. My mother's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Daniel, you're twisting things. This is a family matter. It stopped being a family matter, I said quietly, the day you photographed my client roadmap and toasted with champagne in my office. I have that on the building's own security footage, by the way. Time-stamped. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded printout, the incorporation filing for Fairline Solutions Group, Melissa's name on it in black and white, and I set it in the center of the table, next to the banner's shadow. Then I picked up the extra champagne flute my mother had set at my place, the one she'd brought special for tonight's toast, and I set it down very deliberately on the edge of the table. And I let it fall. It didn't shatter loudly. It just broke clean into 2 pieces on the hardwood in front of everyone. That's for the office, I said. You brought your own glass to celebrate taking mine. I thought it was only fair you got to watch one break too. 2 Fairline employees at the table were already quietly recording on their phones. My attorney Priya, who I'd invited as my +1 without explaining why, stood up and calmly introduced herself to the room, and to Hal, and explained in plain, unshowy language that a formal complaint regarding fraudulent business registration and tortious interference with existing contracts had already been filed that Thursday, and that a certified letter regarding the same would be arriving at this address within the week. Hal Petrenko stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked at my mother. I'll be renewing directly with Daniel, he said. Only Daniel. He walked out. 4 other guests followed him within the minute. My father tried to speak. Son, let's just. You called it org design, I said, still not raising my voice. It was theft. I just needed everyone in this room to see the difference. I picked up my jacket, and I left them standing around a broken glass and a banner that no longer meant anything. What happened next unfolded over the following 4 months, and I'll give it to you the way it actually landed, fast and in pieces. Melissa was issued a cease and desist within 8 days for operating Fairline Solutions Group under a confusingly similar trade name, followed by a civil suit for tortious interference with business contracts. She settled out of court 11 weeks later, agreeing to dissolve the LLC entirely and pay $38,000 in damages and legal fees. 2 of the 4 clients she'd personally poached quietly came back to Fairline within a month. The other 2, embarrassed, simply stopped answering her calls. My father, whose voice was the clearest thing on that recording, was named in the same suit as a co-conspirator, given his direct role in orchestrating client outreach under false pretenses. He avoided criminal exposure, barely, by agreeing to a settlement that included a written admission of wrongdoing. His name is now a matter of public civil record. At his retirement dinner from the county permitting office 4 months later, 3 colleagues who'd read about the case in a small regional business blog quietly didn't show up. My mother wasn't a named party legally. She'd been careful never to sign anything, but socially, the fallout found her anyway. The story made it into a regional business newsletter under the headline Family Business, Family Fraud, and it followed her into every book club and charity committee she sat on. She resigned from the board of a local nonprofit 3 weeks after the dinner, before anyone had to ask her to. I want to be clear about one thing though because it matters more to me than any of the above. 2 of the 11 Fairline employees, Denise, who ran client onboarding, and a junior developer named Marcus, had unknowingly helped Melissa during the transition, believing her story that I'd approved it. When the truth came out, both of them came to me, terrified they'd lose their jobs. I kept them both. I gave Denise a raise actually, because she'd been the one who quietly flagged inconsistencies in Melissa's numbers weeks before I ever confronted anyone. She just hadn't known who to trust with it. I told her plainly that none of this was ever about punishing people who'd been lied to. It was about the people who did the lying. Fairline Routing closed that fiscal year at $2.1 million in revenue, down slightly from the chaos, but every single one of the 47 original clients had either stayed or come back. Hal Petrenko became unofficially one of my closest friends. He still sends me a case of produce every Christmas. I don't even know what to do with that much produce. I keep it anyway. It was raining 10 weeks after the settlement when I opened my front door and found my father standing on the porch. He'd lost weight. His coat was the wrong size for him now, hanging off his shoulders, and he was holding a single duffel bag soaked through at the seams. My mother had asked him to leave, he said. Just for a while, he said. He needed somewhere to stay. Just until things settled. I know I don't deserve it, he said, and his voice cracked in a way that 6 months earlier would have broken something open in my chest. But you're my son. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, the rain coming down behind him, my wife Anna's hand finding my back from just inside the hallway, steady and quiet. I thought about the champagne flute. I thought about org design. I thought about 11 seconds of audio that I will never be able to unhear. You're right, I said. I am your son. That's exactly why I know you taught me to read a room and read people and read intentions. And I'm reading this one clearly. He opened his mouth. I hope you find somewhere warm tonight, I said. It won't be here. And I closed the door. Gently. No slam. I didn't need one. Anna wrapped her arms around me from behind as I stood there in the hallway, listening to the rain against the windows, and she didn't say anything for a long moment. She didn't need to. You okay? She finally asked. Yeah, I said, and I meant it, which surprised me a little. For the first time in a long time, actually. Yeah. Here's what I learned, and I'll say it plainly because I don't think it needs decoration. The people who are supposed to protect you the most are sometimes the ones you have to protect yourself from the most carefully. Being calm isn't the same as being weak. Sometimes calm is just patience with a plan attached to it. And real family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the people who stay standing next to you when everyone else is busy taking things from you. I still own Fairline Routing. My name's back on the glass, no printout taped over it. So let me ask you this, if you found out the people closest to you had been quietly planning to take everything you built, would you confront them the second you found out? Or would you do what I did and wait? Tell me in the comments, I read every single one. And if this story hit you the way I hope it did, hit like, subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the next one.